Hi, my name is Alyssa Moses, and I'm doing my presentation on the Jurassic period. So let me share my screen. Okay, so the Jurassic time period. So the timeline is, the Jurassic is the second of the three time periods during the Mesozoic era, and this occurred 145 to 200 million years ago in the Eon Paleozoic. And I actually took this picture from one of the lecture slides, but this is the Mesozoic era, and here's the Jurassic in between the Cretaceous and the Jurassic period. And the continental locations, so Pangaea split during the Triassic period, but the continents were still close together during the beginning of the Jurassic. But throughout the Jurassic, Pangaea split into two major continents, the Laurasia and Gondwana. And Laurasia ended up splitting into land masses that would form North America and Eurasia, and it also opened up basins for the Central Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. And Gondwana split into land masses that would form Antarctica, Madagascar, India, Australia, Africa, and South America. So you can see these images here. Here's the early Jurassic, where the continents are splitting. Here's Laurasia and Gondwana. They're splitting, but they're still really close together. Where if you see in the late Jurassic, they're splitting and they're a lot farther apart. And here's Gondwana and here's Laurasia again. So the Jurassic geology. So when Pangaea split, it caused the increase of plate tectonic movement, an increase of volcanic activity, and also an increase of mountain building. And because of this, marine sediments were deposited onto continents, which preserved diverse sets of fossils. And other things that it also deposited were gold, coal, and petroleum as well. And the oldest sediments remaining in the deep sea are actually Middle Jurassic oceanic crust. And Jurassic age rocks are concentrated in areas of activity like spreading centers, mountain building areas near subduction zones, and basalts accumulated in ocean basins in the Jurassic period now make up the oceanic crust. And volcanic ash can also be found near active margins. And it's nice to note that there was no polar ice caps, so sea level was higher during this period. So the late Jurassic Morrison Formation. So this is a pretty big geologic formation for finding fossils, and it's in Utah, and it's known for the diverse and large number of fossils that are found here. And it's named after the town Morrison, Colorado, and it includes mostly mudstones, sandstones, conglomerates with some limestones and claystones. And the sediments were uplifted during the late Jurassic. And there's also volcanic ash beds found within the formation from the volcanoes during the Jurassic period. And the lowest portion in some of the sediments have marine origin. So you can see here, this is an image of the formation, and this is an image of some of the fossils found throughout the formation. So the discovered location, the Jurassic period was named in the early 19th century by Alexandre Bognart, who was a French geologist and mineralogist, and he studied the Jura Mountains, which is where the Jurassic got its name. And this is found between France and Switzerland, and this is actually an image of it on the Switzerland side. So the atmosphere during the Jurassic period. During the Jurassic, there was higher levels of carbon dioxide than in present day, and there's also higher levels of humidity than in present day. And this allowed for lush forests filled with fern trees, and this is evidence that there was higher levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because of the amount of fern trees, fossils, and stuff found throughout all of the continents. And the climate during the Jurassic. So scientists have done analysis on oxygen isotopes in marine fossils, which suggests that Earth's climate changed from hot and dry to humid and subtropical. And the temperate zone climate was also similar to present-day subtropical tropical climates. And it's also suggested that the climate in the polar regions was temperate due to the absence of the ice caps. And geochemical evidence also suggests that low latitude surface waters were around 20 degrees Celsius and low latitude deep waters around 17 degrees Celsius. And the middle of Jurassic had the coldest temperatures, and the late Jurassic had the warmest climate. And this switching climate during the Jurassic allowed for lush vegetation and abundance of life. So this is an image of present day, and it's similar to a tropical climate during the Jurassic period. So the plants during the Jurassic, at the beginning of the Jurassic, plants had evolved to start having roots and vascular tissues in order to move water and nutrients throughout it. And this became the dominant way plants evolved during the Jurassic. So an example of this would be ferns. And gymnosperms allowed for wind distribution of pollen, which allowed more to grow. And bisexual reproduction allowed greater genetic combination. So this also helped them evolve and have more and more plants like them. And cicadas are the most abundant plant during the Jurassic, and this is an actual image of them presently because they're still around today. So the dominant animals through the Jurassic, reptiles were the dominant land animal during the Jurassic period, and they had strong ossified skeletons and advanced muscular systems for body support and locomotion. And the reptiles were they were capable of laying abiotic eggs, which means that they kept developing. They kept the young developed, moist and nourished, so the egg was able to the egg was able to sustain the animal inside. And this allowed for the first fully terrestrial animal life cycle. So this is an image of the diverse different animals that were throughout the Jurassic period. So the dominant reptiles throughout the Jurassic. So this is a Brachiosaurus, this is a Diplosaurus, and this is a Stegosaurus. And all three of these were herbivores, and you can see how large they were. And this is a Allosaurus, and this is a Coelosaurus, and they both were carnivores. So they would feed on things like the Brachiosaurus or the Stegosaurus. So the early mammals were small, and they were mostly herbivores, insectivores, and they were not in competition with the dinosaurs. And in August of 2011, scientists in China announced that they discovered a tiny mammal they called Uremia, and it's a eutherin, and it's an ancestor of placental mammals, which meant that the mammals evolved earlier than they thought. And this is a cartoon image of what they thought the Uremia might have looked like. So marine life was highly diverse, and the largest marine carnivore was called Plagiasaurus, which had broad bodies, long neck, and 4 flipper-shaped limbs. And there was also giant marine crocodiles that ate fish, and they were able to go island to island. And we know this because we can find the fossils of them in different locations. Sharks and rays were actually around during that time as well. This is a 6-gill shark in present time, but sharks like this were around during that time as well, during the Jurassic period. There was Ichthyosaurs, cephalopods, which is this here, and we actually have really good fossils of them as well because they would eat fish, and they were in highly oxygenated waters, which is what they need to survive, but they would get excited when they'd get the fish, and they'd end up sinking, and they'd sink too low where there wasn't any oxygen and end up suffocating, and they'd continue to sink down, and we'd have to the bottom of the ocean, which is why we have such great fossils of them. Then we have the ammonites and the corals that were around during this time as well. So the extinctions that occurred during the Jurassic period. So the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event marks the boundary between the end of the Triassic and the beginning of the Jurassic period, with 23 to 24% of marine genre disappearing. And this also caused a collapse in coral reefs and a loss of 84% Maldive species. And ammonites were also impacted by this as well. And there was also local extinctions of radiolarians during this time as well. So this could have been because of sea level rise due to Pangaea split, but the most well-supported theory is due to the start of the volcanic eruptions in the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, or CAMP, and this would have been due to high amounts of CO2 released, causing the climate to change and the ocean to acidify. So here you can see there was the 5 different extinctions, and this is the Triassic-Jurassic, which is right here. So it's not the largest extinction event, but it did have a significant impact. So new life forms after the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event, life was able to diversify. So flowering plants appeared during the Jurassic period, but didn't become abundant until the Cretaceous period. And 3 dinosaurs that appeared during the Jurassic were the Stegosaurus, Brachiosaurus, and Allosaurus. And Uremia and the early mammal we talked about earlier also appeared during this time as well. And something we haven't talked about yet is the Calliogramide, which is closely related to snake flies, but looks similar to an owl butterfly. And scientists believe that this actually used to go and pollinate some of the plants. So new studies. In 2015, researchers found evidence of the Jurassic volcanic events causing an ice age. So the North Sea dome restricted the flow of warm ocean water from the equator to the poles, and this event would have prevented ocean flows, causing the Northern Hemisphere's climate to shift from a warm climate to a cold climate. And researchers believe that this cold period would have gone on until the North Sea dome subsided. And this is because if the warm waters from the equator couldn't reach the poles would get cold, or they would freeze. And in 2020, an article came out about the newly described species of a Jurassic carnivore called Allosaurus geminius, which is found in the lower portion of the Morrison Formation, like we talked about earlier. And they have a complete articulate skull and skeleton, and another articulate skull and associated skeleton. So this is still recent, and this is actually a drawing of what the skull looks like, and this is what the complete skeleton would have looked like. So fun facts. A cinnamon fern fossil from the Jurassic period shows evidence that they were around during the Jurassic period and have remained virtually unchanged. And this is because they have the fossil from the Jurassic period of the cinnamon fern. And since we have them today, they were able to compare them. And what they saw was they haven't really evolved much. They're pretty much the same and they're still doing good. And the Morrison Formation is found in Dinosaur National Monument, which is a place that's open to the public with 6 campgrounds. And I thought this was really cool because when I started researching the Morrison Formation, I thought it'd be a really cool place to go. And I thought that it wasn't a place that would be open to the public. So when I found out it was, I got really excited. And then this is another fun fact, but so there was a show called The Land Before Time, and it was a movie. And I really liked it when I was little, but I never really thought anything of it. But I found out that the Land Before Time didn't actually accurately date the dinosaurs that were depicted. So only 2 of them would have lived during the late Jurassic period, and the rest would have lived during the late Cretaceous period. So only 2 of them, these 2 would have been in the Jurassic, so none of them would have ever been together. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.